You wanted free coffee, you wanted.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be.
Haven't heard it.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Looks like we have the roof makers on with us this morning. And I suppose MJ might join us, so you see her up on the screen, let me know, let her in.
You guys can sit in the front row. We filled the back row.
I'm leaving. I've had a bit. You have?
Yeah, leave early.
Yeah, good morning. So, and yeah, that's where we are now. Back to, where we are here in the class. We're working on the handout BE, what is it, 33? Yes. That's it. And we're getting along there. We got the introduction out of the way and, we're starting to go through the handout. So if you look at the handout, that is, the miracles are numbered. Okay, we have in John 2 to 12, we have 7 miracles that John lists, recounts, and we talked about that last time. Well, is in John's mind, are these the only miracles that Jesus performed? No, because when John talks about these, the signs, he talks about more signs, and then when we get to chapter 20, verse 30, it actually says that Jesus performed more signs. So we've been talking, these are like 7, I don't know, showcases or just 7 examples of the miracles. And he calls them signs, the miracles that John or that Jesus performed throughout. So we have listed on your handout 7 signs, and then I am I'm interested in the 16 times that the Greek word semeion occurs in chapters 2 to 12, because as I said earlier, semeion, in my opinion, is the glue that holds these chapters together. So we're going to look at each miracle, each sign, and then we're going to look at the occurrence of the 16 times in which semeion occurs in 2 to 12, and then it does occur one more time in 20 verse 30. So we talked about that last time. Any questions about that? Thought I heard someone come in, I guess not. So let's keep going with the handout. We finished up with Nicodemus. Nicodemus comes and says that Jesus is able to perform these signs, and he wouldn't be able to perform these if he wasn't from God. So now we're into, on your handout, we're into the second sign. So we're concerned with John 4, 46 to 54. John 4, 46 to 54. Anybody need a Bible? No, Becky, you handed some out. Where's Good. Hiding from.
That's not my Bible.
How'd you even get back there? No. I've got my seat over there. I don't want to be stuck back there.
Oh, that was nasty.
Now, if anybody has a better way to arrange this room, let me know. I mean, this is all news for us. And this is great. I'm glad those of you who don't want to be on camera are finding a way. And Alex not the only one, so, and, you know, we do have chairs over here too.
What's the scripture reading? 46.
John 4,
54.
46 to 54. And it's on your handout. So, and it would be the second sign. But during this story, the fifth occurrence and this will have the fifth occurrence and the sixth occurrence of the Greek word semeion. Sign. So Jesus returns to Cana, and there's an official son, and the son is ill. And he begs Jesus to come to Capernaum and heal his son. So I'm going to jump up to verse, what is it, 48? Then Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. So you have this official, he comes to Jesus, says, I've got a son, he's ill, he died, we don't know. And then Jesus says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. And then the official asks Jesus to come to his house and to heal him there. And Jesus said, no, that's not necessary. Go, your son will live. And then the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him. He hadn't experienced the miracle yet. He hadn't experienced the sign. But he does. How does he experience the sign in this story? Or how does he find out of it?
His servants met him and told him that the boy was living, it says in 51.
And then what did he ask the servants, John or anybody else?
What's that?
Yeah, he wants to know, what time did my son begin to recover? And they said to him, yesterday at 1 PM, and the fever left him. And then the father realized this was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son lived. So, but John has the official believing before that. As soon as Jesus said, go, your son will live, the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, started on his way.
The New International says the man took Jesus at his word, departed. Then his servants came and said,
Okay.
your son is living.
The man took Jesus, at his word.
Another way of saying he believed.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a petty question. I like details. But it
Yes.
said, the fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour. You said it was 1 o'clock. So how you get 1 o'clock in the school? What's the 7th hour? When you get that?
Well, let's go backwards.
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
The
Yes.
seventh hour would be 1.
So what, the time starts at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Instead of midnight?
The day pretty much started.
Have to do with sunrise.
Yeah, it definitely has to do with sunrise, but like the Sabbath, for example, begins at sunset. So then you go. And so if you look at it that way, the day's gonna begin and end at sunset. But when they say the seventh hour, it's the seventh hour from 6 o'clock. So it would be roughly sunrise. So they're beginning the day then. So when they say 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're working.
One way I heard it explained Bethany in Kentucky was that before the 14th century when clocks were invented. The daylight hours were the day and the night was the night, and the day was divided into 12 hours. So it didn't matter how long the day was, it was divided into 12, a twelfth of the daylight was an hour. And same thing at nighttime. Nighttime was started at evening at sundown and ended at sunrise, and nighttime was divided into 12 hours.
So that would change though, it's.
It would change as the sun changed, but it always 6 a.m. was when. We would start, basically it's 12 hours and 12 hours, in the middle of the day was what we call noon, the 6th hour. But the daylight was divided into 12 equal chunks of time.
Thanks for that, Glenn. Okay, so where's the second occurrence in the story, which would be the sixth occurrence of Samael. So Jesus says you have to experience these signs in order to believe. And then it's at the end of the story, 54. Now, this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Galilee. So, first sign is a miracle of turning water into wine. Second sign is an actual healing. So it's the healing of the official sign. So that's the second sign. Now, if you look on the handout, we do have several. No, we don't. We go right from this story, and it's just a basic story. It's not long. It's one of the shorter stories or the shorter miracles in John of the 7 that he has here. And then John takes us in chapter 5 right into the third sign or the third miracle. Now, this is interesting because the word Simeon does not occur. The word sign doesn't occur in this story. But it's, yeah.
Dave, I'd go back to verse 48.
Yeah.
What if you put a question mark at the end of that?
Then Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe.
I mean, is that a critique? Saying to the people, you always want a sign before you believe.
You could, I guess.
I wondered that too, is he being sarcastic by saying, is that what he was meant by that?
Yeah.
Or just stating the fact.
But so that would be the context on it.
Yeah, that's the.
He's
that's
kind of
the
being
question.
sarcastic, saying that
Well,
you always want a sign.
I think so, but George raises an interesting question and because the Greek manuscripts did not have much punctuation. So punctuation is really decided by the translator. Now, other translations, what do we have here? Because do we have the New Living?
Well, this translation puts a little different spin on it. And I
Okay.
think it says, unless you see signs and portents, you will not believe. So that's kind of puts into context that comment about time later. Jesus is just telling them what is going to happen. doesn't actually necessarily heal the child, he just tells them the child is going to live.
Yeah.
So it's more of a fortune telling thing than a miracle in by this translation.
Okay. Other, we have any, what is King James
Says,
saying?
yet except you see signs and wonders, you will not believe.
So none of the translations are putting, at least that I'm familiar with, that are we have here in the room, putting a question mark on that.
There's an exclamation mark on it.
Yeah, I think there's an exclamation, yeah, he's making an affirmative statement.
My footnote makes the point that the you in the verse is plural. So that he's talking to more than one person. Is that what that means?
Yes,
Unless you see the signs and wonders, you will not believe. But my footnote says both instances of the Greek word for you in this verse are plural. So is he talking to all the officials or
Well,
like
that-
a gathered crowd?
that's an important observation, and they're doing that because at the beginning of 48, it says, then Jesus said to him. And then they're saying, okay, in the footnote, we have to be mindful that when the verbs come up here, the verb five, second single, it's second person. And so they're just saying that it makes it a little bit more complicated. But, and Jesus said to him, but then it's the way the verbs are used here, they're plural, so we have to we have to assume that this just isn't him alone. He's talking to him, but for those who are in earshot, it applies to them as well.
Well, they're gonna say at the beginning of 48, unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders. Those are you people, so that's.
Well, yeah, that's what, that's what, Jake is saying to you. So at the beginning of 48, then Jesus said to him, unless you,
See, mine says you people.
yeah, and that's where mine has a footnote saying it's plural. And the reason, now what's your translation? The New Living?
International.
New International, okay. The reason it has people is to let you know that it's plural. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that from reading the English. The only way you know it's plural if you're reading from the Greek.
My New Revised Standard Version
Yeah.
says, the miracle was more than a favor to one official, it was a sign to all.
And see, they're really picking up, and see, remember, we missed this if the English translations don't point it out. So your translation, your edition of the NIV said, no, we're gonna point it out, because the word people is not in that sentence. It's not there, and so that's where, and we'll talk about that when we get into translations. There are word for word translations, where they're just going to translate the words, and then there are thought for thought translations, where if the thought is you plural, they're gonna put an extra word in there to translate that thought. And that's very important, because I think it's important, you know, we, as I said last time, we all have our pet translations, so you work with that. But, and if your pet translation is a word for word translation, you probably should also have a thought for thought translation next, next door or on your desk, so you can see some differences. And if you're not quite sure what the difference between a word for word translation and a thought for thought translation, we're going to get into that in detail once we're done with John. We're going to look at the translations. We're going to look at word for word translation. What does that mean? What clarifies a word for word translation. We'll look at thought translations, then we're gonna look at a balance. There are some translations that are intended to be a balance of word for word and thought, and then we'll look at paraphrases. We'll get into all that. And
Bring or being today's world.
yeah,
I guess one question is, how can we apply this scripture? And what are miracles that we see today? I guess that's the second question. Because it's so different, we're in such different times, different culture from that John was living.
well, we don't have someone like Jesus that we're aware of, going around and performing miracles such as this. But what I've always done in looking at the New Testament, and you could even say the Old Testament, because we do have some miracles that are attributed to God that occur in the Old Testament, Moses parting the Red Sea, Elijah asked a woman to, and who has a son, they're down to their last cup of flour, their last morsel of oil and parcel of oil, and he says, make me some bread. She doesn't. So she never runs out in her lifetime. So that's a miracle. And there are some other miracles in the Old Testament. But I say miracles happen all the time. And they happen and we may not be aware of. So that's one way that I go with a story like this and apply it to today. We have John listing 7 miracles. Don't. And these miracles are designed to have the people believe. It's making that connection. So, does God, our relationship with God, or our relationship with Jesus, does that reveal miracles to us on a regular basis, or on a not so regular basis? It's not like I say miracles happen all the time, but that may not be the case when you look at the text. They happen at certain times. So what are your thoughts on that? Do miracles occur? Or are we just talking about when something occurs that some people call a miracle, others may call it a coincidence of circumstance?
It's a miracle how far medical science has come. I'm thinking of my sister-in-law with 2 types of cancer. And she was diagnosed in Louisville in October. They could only treat one kind. She's still living, right? She's still fairly helpful. I mean, healthy. She's stable. Now they're thinking about treating the other kinds. And it's just amazing. I use the word amazing, that the medical profession, scientists, researchers have come that far. Have come as far as what they are.
Yeah, well, and that's modern society, postmodern society. We're doing things now that we could never do in one time. So it's kind of miracle in itself that we figured out how to do these things. Or when we talk about miracle, is it something different from that? Something that happens in our lives that we just can't explain, doesn't really make sense, but it happened. That's
There for the grace of
one explanation.
what's that saying there? Therefore, the grace,
There, but for the grace of God.
yeah, go on, yeah. And I heard that term, and usually it was something that was dangerous to the individual. That, you know, you could have been in the spot. And you have to take it.
Okay,
Here, under the Harrisburg Patriot News on Sundays, runs a column by Rabbi Gelman. Anybody know him? And lately, we've been talking about God winks. And those are the things that people, and things that have happened to them, and that's what Rabbi calls them, God winks.
God bless.
I must watch forward. On what they use that on some of their comments.
Is that right?
You use the word coincidence, I think that may be commonly referred to by people. I call it the mystery of God.
Like that too.
It's just like something may happen over there and it happens to me at the same time and it's related. And not gonna go into specific examples, but I think, that comes from, for me, things aren't black and white about the here and now or future. For me, it's a lot of gray area. I sit very comfortably with that. So I just, mystery of God.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. And just, thanks and keep going.
Yeah, and so if we call it a miracle, that's fine. If we don't call it a miracle, we call it the mystery of God, or just being aware that God is involved in our lives in some way. And I think my theology is similar to Jim. I don't have to have it all figured out because and I've said this before, we have finite minds and we're trying to deal with infinite issues. Supernatural, or just divine, I forget the word supernatural, but we're dealing with finite minds trying to deal with divine issues. And we can't, we can try to explain as much as we can, but at some point, we just have to.
Yeah,
Turn it over
picking
to
up on
God.
that, Dave, I find myself, there's a Down syndrome child in our family.
Yeah.
And I think about Alzheimer's. And we say, they don't know what's going on. But that's our interpretation. If we believe in miracles and out of the ordinary, those persons experience it different than I do. And I interpret they don't know what's going on. But does that make sense to you? I always assume that they have a sense that we don't understand. It's a mystery.
or when people come, some people who feel the time is near for them to meet the certain God and so on. How do they know that? You know, that's a mystery to me. How do they know that? Down syndrome.
Well, yeah, and I've been at the bedside of many people and I've seen, people just hang on to life and they just can't let go. And then I've seen people who, they get to a certain point and whether someone gives them permission to die or they just come to that realization themselves, it just happens. So, and that's a mystery. We can't really figure that out. I've had people, and this has happened maybe 2 or 3 times, trying to remember whether it's 2 or 3, let's just say several times. Maybe I've told you this story before, but I've had at least 2 people say to me at different times, and they were not far from death. And they would say, Dave, what's going to happen to me when I die? And I would say, well, the Sunday school answer is, did you give your heart to Jesus and all that? But I would say, in these 2 instances, I said, I don't know what's going to happen. That's never happened to me, but here's what I believe. I believe you're gonna stop breathing, your body's physically going to die, and you're gonna go be with God. And then there was just this kind of, and I don't believe I said that, I believe that was a miracle in itself, that God gave me the thought or the words to say that at that time. I take credit for it, but probably too quickly. I need to give credit. God gave me those words in that time. And then to see the reaction by the person, say, oh, okay, that makes sense or whatever. It's just, and then, shortly after that, they both died. But they needed something that they could hang on to that would allow them to die. It's one way to look at that. So again, that's where I come from when I say I think miracles happen all the time, because God gives us things that we might not think of. And to me, it's just, can we be aware of certain things? I mean, because we're all busy, we're all rushing, we're all trying, and our minds are, but can we be aware? Can we stop or slow down and be aware of what, of who God is and what God is doing? We're gonna need to move on soon, but go ahead, one more.
Is faith a miracle?
Could be. I think, John doesn't call it a sign, but he's connecting belief and faith to the signs, to the miracles. Because faith, you have to, there are times when we just have to take the faith for those things we don't understand. Now, the movie Bonhoeffer just came out. We saw that. I recommend that. Didn't always get good reviews, but we thought it was well done, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it's not the action. But Bonhoeffer dealt with the notion of Deus ex machina, that, and you talked about this a little bit, and where miracles become less and less as science becomes more. So Bonhoeffer really dealt with that. So, okay, don't let that notion that we can do more with science, because his point was, well, people need God less. Because we needed God because had to explain the unexplainable with God. And now that we're able to do all these things, we don't need God. Well, sure do, and that's where faith comes. Things can be there. How do we get that faith? And we all have our own faith journey. We all have our own stories. It's different for each of us. So at times like this, it's nice to share our stories.
Just a side note, and I made a mistake when I said I had a Down syndrome. If I do a recruitment to change words of how I use, it'd be up syndrome instead of down.
Right.
But we choose words to explain, and it's not a down.
It's just a joy, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's a human being, and
Yeah.
there's, and I have a relative who, when she was pregnant, she was obsessed that her child, or she has 2 children, one of her child might have had I don't know what to call it, a deformity or something like that. And for her, fortunately, she did, but I was thinking. The heart this person has, it's better to have a child that would not be quote unquote normal. She would have loved that child. I don't know, there was just, that's something she obsessed with. So I guess I say that just to say that, you know, not, you know, we're all born different things and so. More problematic than others in the sense that they can't care for themselves. Whatever. So we deal with that as best we can. Joe, you were getting ready to say something?
Yeah, it's interesting. Many people feel that the more science and technology can explain things that less you need to deal with mystery. I feel just the opposite, having delved into science and technology since middle school, made a career of it.
Yeah.
I am more amazed and view everything in a very miraculous kind of way. Why should I become more and more convinced of a creator? It was
Right.
the more I studied.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everyone for this discussion, at least for those who participated and those who, just because you didn't say anything doesn't mean you didn't participate. Right, Galen? So, hanging in there. So let's go on to the next sign. It is the third sign, the healing of the layman. And what's important here is that, I think I said it a minute ago, the word Simeon, the word sign, doesn't occur in this story. It's a long story. And it's chapter 5, verses 1 to 18. So the man was paralyzed for 38 years, and Jesus engages in a conversation with him. It's not a long conversation, and then he simply tells him, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. So he's healed just by speaking. And now this occurred on the Sabbath, so the Jews, Jesus is gone now. So the Jews criticized the man for carrying his mat. And the man says, well, hey, this guy comes along, he heals me. He says, stand up, take up your mat and walk. I'm going to do it. I don't care if it's the Sabbath or not. You give me a hard time, but I'm going to do it. And the leaders want to know who it was that healed him because they couldn't find him. He couldn't find the man. So then Jesus catches up to him later. And they have a conversation. And then the man goes back to the Jewish leaders and say, well, Jesus is the one who healed him. Now, the text says that the Jews were out to get Jesus because he healed on the Sabbath and he connected his healing to God. So you have some of the Jewish leaders are critical of the man for carrying his bed or mat during the Sabbath, on the Sabbath, and they're also critical of Jesus for healing on the Sabbath. And this is important because this is going to be a thing of contention from here on out with the Jewish leaders and and Jesus, because the main criticism of Jesus, well, he doesn't observe the Sabbath, he has to be killed. Now, that more of an excuse, perhaps, but the things do get political as we move on. As we move through these 7 miracles, things start to become more political because it really in the end, one of the reasons that the leaders are so afraid is that they feel if Jesus keeps performing these miracles, the Romans are gonna come and they're gonna destroy Judah and Jerusalem and all of that, because they're not gonna like the fact that they have a person going around performing miracles, and then all these people want to believe in it. So that's the threat. They gotta get rid of that. So for John, that's what takes Jesus to the cross. And you're gonna see this, but it starts here in chapter 5 with this third miracle. Jesus told a man, take up his mat and walk on the Sabbath, and he healed. This is where it starts. And any questions here? Yes.
It's interesting that in verse, what is that, 14? Jesus said to the man.
Yeah,
Or the man said to Jesus, later, she just found him in the temple.
that's right.
Said to him, see, you have been made well, do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you. Is he implying that sin made him unwell?
Well, we've talked about this off and on. When we first started with you, when we get to, I think it's chapter 9, man is born blind. The disciples say to Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Well, could have been the man if he was born blind. Can't sin before you're born, can you? So, so there is that thought running through it in ancient Israel and on that, and it really comes from Proverbs. And if you do good things in this life, you will live good life, and if you do not so good things or bad things in this life, then you will reap bad things. You will suffer this life. And then there was the thought of some people that this could be generation since parents come down to children. So this is a hard one to explain, because you have it several times here in John, you have it sometimes in some of the synoptics, where this whole idea, go and sin no more. Was he connecting it to the fact that he was blind? He was born that way, so he did sin. Now there are times when he says to the woman caught in adultery in chapter 8 it is. And of course, she was in adultery. And then when all the people leave, after Jesus says, those of you who have no sin, you may cast the first stone, and they leave one by one. And Jesus says to her, well, where are they? They're gone. Go. Sin. So here, yeah, I'm not sure I have a good answer. This is I mean, theologians and biblical scholars will try to come up with an answer. The only answer I have is that there was that thought by some people, but then the book of Job and the book of Ecclesiastes challenges that. So yes, there is innocent suffering in our world, and there is suffering that occurs that's outside of sin.
This is how my commentator
Yeah.
addresses this. Jesus does not say that the disease was the result of sin.
Right.
He warns the man that his cure is a divine favor that must be acknowledged by conversion. To forget this is to risk something worse than the disease. The miracle is therefore a sign of spiritual resurrection.
I get that, but Why does he say go and sin no more?
That's the man's responsibility to acknowledge his conversion.
But there's the implication that, well, if he was a human and blind man for 38 years, perhaps, human sin. So no doubt did sin, that's. Any other annotated notes on that from your commentary? Well, mine refers me back to 8 verse 11 in John, which would be the woman caught in adultery. Okay, who we got? Is Paul probably?
The bar on the right side.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Jake, you wanna take over for this?
Well, what's up?
It's a miracle.
I'm trying to read that one.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read it?
I just can't get it to go up.
Oh,
There it is.
yeah.
Oh, this is Paul's comment. Sorry, Paul,
Yeah, Down syndrome is named for Dr. John Down, who accurately prescribed the problem in the 1800s. The name is not related to the idea of it being good, up, down, bad.
Yeah.
It's the last name. Interesting.
So, George is John, he's the one who related that, so I'll pass that along to him. Thanks, Paul, and that was from our earlier discussion.
Laney's Bible on the footnote here says that that might imply that sins had caused the disabilities.
Yeah.
But here it says it implies that these disabilities such as blindness, that they are always caused by sin, but does not say they are never caused by sin. So
Right.
Jesus says something where Jesus warns the man that to relapse into sin could result in even greater judgment. So it doesn't, they didn't always say that they caused by sin, but he doesn't say that they were never caused by sin, so.
Yeah.
It could go either way on that.
Sure. So you're gonna have different explanations on this. What's the, and this. This does catch your attention. And he says,
Shattered. What?
It's always so ambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What does that mean?
oh,
You can take it however you want to.
Exactly.
yeah, they're trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, right.
And that's okay. I mean, that's.
Trying to make everybody happy.
From what I got from what Rick read from that annotated note, is that it wasn't necessarily caused by sin, but could have been.
He's not saying it wasn't caused by sin.
Yeah, exactly, that's what they weren't saying how it was. And I think we kind of want that because we know. I believe, I should say, that innocent suffering occurs in this world. There's 20 to 30,000 children that die each and every day due to preventable starvation and preventable disease. And one of the reasons we have enough food to feed everyone. We just don't manage it very well.
Also, child abuse.
Yeah. So we can come up with tons of, and I don't think any of us goes through life unscathed. We all have suffered in one way or another, whether it's grief, abuse, or whatever. And is that because we did something wrong? We spent a lot of time as a pastor working with people on theological issues. I didn't do anything wrong. Or did I? people feel guilty, well, I had this happen to me. And so we spend time trying to make sense of that. Should they feel guilty about something that they really had no control over? So it raises a good theological question, the connection between sin and something. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I was going to add, if you miss the signs of illness, for example, colon cancer, if you don't get your checkups or your colonoscopy, no.
Yeah, that's what it is.
After a certain time, how old you are, or if you're showing signs of irregular, not normal abdominal cramps or
Yeah,
bowel movements or whatever,
yeah,
you know, then if you skip that, if you say, oh, well, there's nothing wrong, it's just something, then you let it go. Well, yeah, I mean, you could say you sinned when the person gets very, very ill and then passes
Well-
away. Well, they didn't act on the signs. That's.
well, that's where modern science comes in. My mom had, in 2018, in her, I think she was 86. She had, colon cancer. And you get it by polyps. And she never had a colonoscopy. So we could have caught this.
Yeah.
But she had surgery. So is that a sin or is that just being neglectful?
It depends, I think, if you consider neglectful as a sin.
Well, and it all comes back to the question of why, right? That's what we were talking about. They needed an answer for why do these things happen? And that's what religion was doing. And so science has helped us to better understand
Yeah.
why these things happen. And a lot of the times it's just what happens.
Yeah.
Right? So if we lean on science to answer that question, then all these little verses that agree with each other don't matter much.
I think it might also make people feel better, because they're like, well, that won't happen to me because like I'm a good person.
Right?
Yeah.
But I always go back to an old story, and I think about this a lot of times. There was a flood happening, and there was a man in his house. The water was coming up, and you know, they came along to save him. And he said, "No, God will save me." While he's on his roof, and a boat came along. God will save me, and he died. He drowned, and he went to heaven. He said, "Why did you save me, Lord?" He said, "I did. I sent you a boat. I sent you, I sent you all these things to save you. Right? I tried to save you. We want God to do it, but He might have been the one sending the boat. So we need to. Sometimes we miss the obvious miracle
Yeah,
because we're looking for a greater miracle.
those are miracles and says,
What's that?
that's a story.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You never heard that story?
I heard the story, but when he said we're looking for a bigger miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good interpretation, Rick. Well, there's that saying, God helps those who help themselves. So, God has given us minds. Even though we can't figure everything out, we have to use this noggin. If we're in danger of drowning and a boat comes by and it jumps.
I had an experience one day. I was at work and we were doing a difficult job and it was not going well at all. And the guys that were helping me were fussing about it and we should just call the boss and we need to just quit this job. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I stopped and I prayed, which I don't do on a regular basis. I can do my own job, So I prayed for some help, guidance, something, help me get through this. And our day went better after that. And so that, to me, that's a miracle. I mean, I don't know how, but our day went better and we went through the day and we kept working and we did our job. And so it does help. It's there.
Well,
We have to get it sometimes.
yeah, we have to get it. And that's what I was trying to say earlier. Just be aware. These things do happen. I can't explain it. And the one thing I can explain is why some miracles happen to some and not to others. Because I know people who have prayed for something and it would work out the way they would. But, sometimes we just pray because we don't know what else to do.
And God didn't necessarily make anything happen different that we were already dealing with. I think it just set my mind at ease that, okay, hey, this is what we have to do. But whatever, it helped me through the day.
Well, and prayer can do that. Well, we're out of time and we didn't cover a lot on the handout, but I'm okay with that. If we had discussions like this, I mean, the handout is just a guide to get us going. So I like it. This doesn't happen every Sunday, but I like it when we can get on to a theological discussion, a biblical theological discussion that helps us deal with life today. These miracles, these signs just aren't ancient history. Things like this happen today, just in a different way. Okay, catch y'all next week. Keep plugging along.
Good morning, how you doing? Okay.
Yeah, you too.
Hiring 50 engineers.
That's great.
We just not get some people here to figure out what we do.
One of the guys in the school just took a big test to see if he could, work on it.
Right.
He hasn't heard back yet, but it's.
He just did a phone interview and the person interview.
Well, if Miles doing engineering, this guy would probably be doing more like higher level, like maintenance stuff, like they're still taking down one of those towers. So demolishing the one tower, restarting the other, and then the other one has to sit.
Well, it's I handed it just a little bit, but how, you have a verse here that just doesn't quite make sense.
But I can see where a classic evangelical
Yeah.
reform took that, that fits our.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, you have a verse that doesn't quite make sense, and then it's interesting to see all the explanations to try to make it make sense.
And that's why I love that exegetical summary series, because it just collates everything they can get their hands on.
Right,
And gives you different, they'll ask a question like, what was meant by something worse, and then they give different points of view. That's a neat series. Westminster Study Bible, have you run into that yet?
Well, I see it all the time I get
Came out in
emails.
October.
Yeah, I'm aware of it, I just haven't purchased it because.
Well, I looked
of
at
this.
it, and here's my take on it. And you can
Because
go
it's
there.
the Westminster Study Bible
Yeah,
of the new RSV.
Yeah, update,
week.
it's John Knox Press.
Hey, Landon, how you doing?
Hey,
Good to see you.
yeah, John Knox Press has it.
Well, yeah, they're really pushing it,
Yeah,
so.
and the editor is one of the profs up at Messiah. In not the religion department, but more of the sociological.
Oh, okay.
And see, they're pushing it as, and this is their shtick, they have a good shtick. As a professor in a secular university in this course about
Yeah.
the Bible, wouldn't you like to have something that can act as your primary source and textbook? And a big shtick is a lot of excursi that just go into the different topics you can assign as ancillary readings as well as the biblical text together and not just to be a package for the the undergraduate schools that has introduction to Bible.
Yeah.
That's a good shtick. There's a interesting, it's
Yeah.
take is very different than the SBL. Or the
Right.
New Oxford or
Uh-huh.
the even the there's a third one out, not Henderson, but there's a third book that's often used in colleges, Juniata used it, my daughter-in-law can't think of the HarperCollins.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, yeah.
HarperCollins.
Yeah, that, yeah.
So anyways, it's like they're trying to hit a market for it.
Well, I hear that, that makes sense, because, they want to sell
I looked at
as many.
when I saw the annotated notes, I don't think are a lot different than the typical annotated notes of the individual verses or pericopes. But they do have a lot of auxiliary kinds of things stuck in there.
You're talking about the Westminster
The
Study Bible?
Westminster, yeah, so that seems to be significantly different.
So the annotated notes aren't so much different, what's different?
They have little, they call them excursions.
Oh, yeah, right.
They're just all over the place. And it's like they combine a textbook and study Bible all in one volume. And that's how they present it almost. The spiel, always fun.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Joe.